This individual right here is Jeffrey Hudson, a famous man of Renaissance England. They call him famous, even though you've probably never heard of him before, because he's one of those really obscure people in history. And I'm all for that, obscurities and the lesser known parts of history, and little old Jeffrey here is one of them. Anyway, here's Jeffrey. Oh, whoa, why is the camera zoomed in? Hold on, let me fix that real quick. Alright, there we go. Jeffrey Hudson, or his unfathomably superior nickname, Lord Minimus. Yes, that is how tall he was. 18 inches of pure masculine energy right here. A height so startling and a life so interesting makes this good storytelling. So, Jeffrey Hudson, born on a hot June day in 1619 in Rutland, England. He was born into a relatively poor family for Renaissance England. Despite being so low down in the social class pyramid, the family had a connection to a form of royalty thanks to the father, who was a designated ball keeper for the Duke of Buckingham. By the time Geoffrey was 7, the eyebrows of those around him were raised over how small he really was. And instead of being whatever the average height of a 7-year-old in 1600s England was, he stood at 1.5 feet tall. Such a bizarre and lesser known condition had Geoffrey left with labels from passer-bys, mainly stuff about him being a rarity of nature, and probably something to do with him being vertically challenged. But thanks to the obvious condition he had, some speculations came about as to why he was so damn small in the first place. And there are two reasons. A logical reason being he lacked growth hormones. You can tell this is the more modern explanation because no one back then would have a clue on what a hormone was. And then there's the less logical reason, where his mother choked on a gherkin while she was pregnant with him. I think she should practice breathing through her nose the next time she's caught choking on gherkin. His condition grabs the attention of the Duke and his wife, who wish they could have a small person with them, ultimately giving Geoffrey a fast pass to the high life. Some months roll over and Geoffrey would change families a second time, going to the top of the social class ladder, joining the King and Queen of England themselves. And since this passover was kind of a big thing, the Duke and Duchess wanted to make it special for them. They shown Geoffrey to the King and Queen not as a person, but as a gift, in a way that, I'll give credit where it's due, was very creative for the time. The presentation of Geoffrey to the King and Queen went like this. Geoffrey would jump out of a large pie that was baked for a special banquet that was taking place in the evening, wearing nothing but a suit of armour. The King and Queen absolutely loved the surprise, and they accepted him as a gift. Now at this point in Geoffrey's life, his status in society has changed in two ways. Despite being somewhat part of royalty, he's now been downgraded from being a human to now being classed as a pet for the King and Queen. But mostly the Queen, since Charles is busy arguing with Parliament over power. Geoffrey wasn't the only pet to them though, they had a few other exotic and rare pets too, like a giant Welshman, 2 more dwarves, and a pet monkey. But that's enough about them, the spotlight's focused on the famous Geoffrey, the Queen's favourite and special little guy. With his height came his humour. Getting a 2-for-1 deal with Geoffrey, he'd entertain the royal court not only for his appearance, but for his quick wit and comportment. From this, he got spoiled rotten, riding horses with the Queen, getting dripped out in the best fits 17th century England had to offer, commissioning painters to capture moments of him and said drip, and a lot more royalty stuff. He got involved in some trips over to mainland Europe, where one mission was to fetch a French midwife for the Queen, because the English Queen is French. At least that's what he was told he'd be doing, but in reality he was being sent to the French royal court to show them the type of people they're missing out on. The ship got ransacked by some Spanish pirates on the way back. No one got hurt thankfully, unless you count the pockets of everyone on board. While growing up under the Queen's wing, he was be shaped into what is expected of him, becoming a Roman Catholic in a country of Protestants, and learning important skills for those days, like riding a horse and how to shoot a gun. All is well for him, until it's time for Charles and his parliament to have the last straw in a haystack of disagreements with each other. And now it's time for civil war. Geoffrey and the Queen flee to the Netherlands to get support for Charles. They managed to raise enough money to send him supplies, but that was all they could do, so they headed on back to England to try and support him better. So much for the support they promised to give him. They were getting ready to flee again, but this time to France, since they now comprehended that going back to a country during a civil war is a bad idea, and that it's only going to get worse for them. While they stayed in exile, Geoffrey has now turned a new leaf against his life of being a joke and a pet to the royals. and firmly put his tiny foot down and declared he was not going to take any shit from anyone. A certain man would put that declaration to the test and insulted Jeffrey to see what his reaction would be. I was surprised to hear that he was demanded a duel by Jeffrey. He agreed, and they duelled it out in the French countryside, but the man sincerely thought Jeffrey was bluffing. He cockily doubled down on that supposed bluff and showed up without a gun. Instead, he came with a water-filled syringe and squirted it on Jeffrey. You want to know how he responded? The death of this man was a bomb drop on himself for many reasons. Not only did he just kill a guy, but he also broke the law. He didn't realise that dueling laws in France and England are different, and France has outlawed it for some time now. To top this situation off, the man he killed wasn't just some random Frenchie, he was the brother of one of the Queen's court heirs. Whoops. The severity of his crime was enough to be executed, but fortunately for him though, the Queen had intervened on the talks about executing him and his life got spared. But now, he's forced to head back to England. For the next part of his life, I suppose you can account for the dueling incident to be a key moment where his life began to go sideways. His life of living with those in power comes to an end, and within as little as few months, he was be hundreds of miles away from England, on the coast of North Africa, as a slave to the Ottomans. He spent a long and grueling 25 years a slave until he was rescued by the English. It comes to everybody's surprise that the little man had in fact grown during this time, growing an extra 30 inches, making him about the same height of a 5-year-old today, which he believes only came from the as he said, he got from his captors. The final years of Jeffrey's life aren't all that known, since he's moved on with his life now that he's back in England, and resides back in his hometown, never looking back on what he had before it all fell apart. He didn't appear on English records until 1669, whether that's the year he actually arrived back in England isn't known. He never pursued to get back with the royals, not even returning to the Queen's court again. The only time he did have some contacts with them was through some grants he was given out by the new Duke of Buckingham and Charles Jr., which is where those first records came from. As for the Queen herself, Geoffrey's unofficial partner and companion for most of his life, she died in 1669 in France. The final major event that occurred in Geoffrey's life at this point was him getting thrown into prison while he was in London for simply being a Roman Catholic, spending 4 years in the slammer before being released, and living on another 2 years until he died at the age of 63, with only his adventurous past to his name and some leftover money given to him from Charles II for his pension. And that brings us to the end of little Geoffrey's large life. A man who tastes his life in every aspect and died as he was born, poor. But anyway, that's the end. I hope you enjoyed, and thanks for watching.